food poisoning and all the things that we go through.
Luckily enough,
and road
not
trips
lately.
And long car rides and all the stupid things that happen.
I've ate so many potatoes in Canada. It's not even funny. It's unreasonable. I was hanging out with Chris Miller last night, and he made a specific point. He called my wife and was just like, Zara, Chris had a little bit of cabbage last night. Like he did eat a little bit of vegetables.
You might get a little bit.
Like it's all right. There's a little bit of health. I'm like, I had some pickles on my fries.
I love it's right. Pickles a vegetable. It's technically a cucumber. I would love to know how many kilometers, how many miles are on your car that are like con miles. How many cons you've driven to? Like of the mileage on your car, you don't drive that much probably like around town. In New Jersey.
My work is 8 miles from my house now.
Yeah.
Like it used to be longer.
Yeah. Like
80%
of the miles on your car from going to conventions, I bet.
More. Yeah. Because it's like, so it's 8 miles to and from. So it's like 16 miles a day. But like to here, it's 440 miles.
I know.
Like,
that's what I mean.
It's at least 260 to Nova. It's,
that's so funny.
230 to get to Captain Con. So, yeah, my car only has like
con miles on it.
32,000 miles on it. At least
Kelly
a third
Blue Book.
of
It's like they're mostly con miles, guys. It's not highway miles. They're mostly con miles. Well, hey everybody, welcome to Inside Tabletop. I'm here with Chris.
Hello.
And we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about conventions today. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Chris on to talk about conventions, gaming conventions in general, man, they are such a huge part of the gaming industry right now, tabletop industry. They are used as almost as big as social media is in the delivery and the promotion of tabletop games. Conventions are another separate platform now that are used and kind of leveraged to try and get all your customers in one place and talk to them directly. And there's a few cons that have really transitioned into being important, especially in North America. There's a huge one in England called Salute. There's the European Game Expo, which is another huge one. And the reason I wanted to have you on is you and I met at a con. We met at, what was it called?
CMON
Expo in 2016 or 2017? 2017 CMON Expo, which is the Cool Mini or Not Expo in Atlanta. And you are like a perennial con goer. You've been to like every East Coast con that's like a major con you've been to, some of which don't even exist anymore. Like TempleCon isn't even a convention. You volunteered for a gajillion different companies from like terrain makers, small like laser startups, mat companies, various game companies. You just got back from Nova Open 2024.
Just got back from Nova, yeah.
And you were volunteering for Modifius.
World of Game Design representing Modifius.
Sure, yeah. But
also,
wow, you ran a Modifius game.
Also
for the con.
Worked the vending booth for A-Case while I was out there too, which was great.
So there you go. So the reason I wanted to have you on is I wanted to talk about con life and how this has become so important inside the world of tabletop games. But first I just want to ask you, man, like, how'd you get into this? Like, you are so giving of your time, and and the thing I've always loved about you, and the reason we've stayed in touch is you always pick companies with your heart. You know what I mean? Like, I like these guys. I like what they're trying to do. They're a smaller company. They're a startup. I'm going to give them my time. Where did this come from in you? Like, why? How is this a thing that you started like doing?
I mean, the conventions and the companies are kind of two different answers. But like with the conventions, 2013, I went to TempleCon. It was the first convention that I ever went to. I went up with a bunch of War Machine players who were local. We're like, oh, you got to go. Like, this is great. It's such an incredible thing. Yeah. And I went up and I definitely did too much. Like I slept less than 3 hours a night for the entire time I was
early
up there.
Conventions were madness, though.
Because there were full tournaments that started at midnight. Yeah. That you would go from midnight to 7, and that's what it was. It was like, oh well, these other tournaments sold out. So Chris, like, hop into this Midnight Madness tournament. So like, okay, what is it? It's like it's a full steamroller convention.
From midnight until 7 a.m.
That's like what we do at 7. It's like, oh, well, then we go to Denny's
and we get breakfast.
It's like, all right, yeah. And we did all that, and I just remember gaming straight the entire time, like from beginning to end until Sunday when it was like, oh, there's other stuff to do here. Like,
I feel like there was a critical mass of gaming conventions where that happened, and and it was at a time in that like 2010s ish era where it's before Games Workshop woke up on social media, and mid-sized game companies had a bigger part of the pie at the time, like not financially, but visually they did. And so there was a ton of enthusiasm where you got to get together at these gaming conventions and play a bunch of games that you were excited about that nobody else really knew about. So like if you were into these mid-sized company games like War Machine or Infinity, this was like the real almost golden age of them being at events, because there was just this feeling of like, oh, I only know like 6 people that know about this game in my area, but I get to go hang out with 50 and play as many. And it's like you can eat as much as you want all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like that energy. That's why those like overnight events and stuff happen, because they don't do those anymore.
No, not as much. That's definitely been a change. But yeah, so I got involved there. And then at the end of the show, ended up like sitting down. They're like, oh, there's other things to do. You don't need to game all the time.
Sure.
And that really didn't occur to me at the time. I was like, oh, what do you... Oh, they're doing shadow theater to Dr. Horrible. I was like, all right, cool. And then sat down, and TempleCon had so many cool things like that.
And they had a vendors hall too, didn't they?
Yeah, and the vendors hall was everything. It was not just a gaming thing. Yeah. It was like you could get exotic tea, and you could get...
Because it was
like,
a steampunk convention.
Yeah, you could get corsets. Yeah. Like it was bizarre, but writers would be there. So there's a lot of things to do outside of the gaming kind of stuff. And literally a week after that TempleCon, I actually met my now wife.
That's amazing. Because she was at the steampunk part of it, yeah?
No, like, so completely separate, you know.
Oh,
like,
okay, crazy.
Ended up like playing a show just a week later with, my band at the time. And that's where I met my wife. But I was like, man, so one of the first like major conversations we had when we were dating, I was like, hey, so I do the gaming stuff. I went to this convention. It was a really good time. I'm planning to go to the Nova Open. I hear really good things about it. And what I think she heard was, so if I play these games, I get like a free vacation to DC.
Basically, I get to go to DC. Yeah.
And
I got a free car ride to DC. We get to eat in restaurants and stuff. Cool.
And that actually got my wife into gaming. Like
That's amazing.
She got into War Machine with the idea that this would be our vacations.
Sure. Yeah.
Along the way, like I started doing more things. I think it was Malifaux was the first game I really did any type of henchman, press ganger.
Yeah, you started volunteering for them. That's right. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And I started doing that in my local store. Yep. And then, when Captain Con started, and they were looking for people to run events. When TempleCon was looking for additional people, that's stuff that I kind of got into. I was running Infinity.
So it started the store thing, and then like you made the connection. I can come do this in a bigger venue now outside my store at these cons.
Yeah, and it was just I see a need for it, and let me go and let me like help out, because I like getting newer players into it. I like being able to provide that experience. This was also in that like 2014, 2015 period where certain games were really struggling, and we had a lot of old blood, but like not a lot of new blood was coming in. So, for those con years of like 2014 to like 2019, it's the same people. It was the same exact crowd. I was seeing the same exact faces every year.
So you're a very East Coast convention guy, East Coast United States. So you're from New Jersey.
I'm from New Jersey.
Yeah, born and raised. Jersey represent.
So I was doing a lot of East Coast kind of stuff. Basically, like you said, all the way down from CMON Expo, all the way up north to PAX East and like Boston and stuff. And then it wasn't until I started working for companies, which was really almost by accident. It was a Muse on Minis was the first company really to ask me to kind of fill in, and it was just they just got their Steamforge contract.
Yep.
So one of them needed to stay back to make stuff, and one of them was going to the show. And Nigel reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, Chris, I know you're on this con. Like, could you just be at the booth? We'll pay for your ticket. We'll do this and that."
Yeah, so you're doing a weekend job basically. You're getting paid for a weekend's work. You're coming in. You're being a booth bunny and doing your backup thing.
And there wasn't really like a lot of expectation. It was just like be there so that like if John needs to go to the bathroom, if John needs to do this, like you're there.
You're a part-timer basically.
But they were just looking for me to be there.
Yeah.
But I do have a big retail history, and it became John's like, we sold like 4 times more at the show than we thought we were going to sell. Like, can you also work Nova for us? And then
you get invited back, and it's the one thing for Black Hawk Down. I hate being dependable, man, because now all of a sudden everybody wants you to come work all these cons.
And then it became a thing where it was like, all right, well, we actually want to fly you out to these other cons. It's a big enough thing. So like that's how I got to go to Warfare Weekend, War Machine Weekend, Adepticon, and then you just kind of build from there, And I've never really slowed it down. I like going to conventions. I like spending time with people. I don't really vacation much outside of this, so it's like I have PTO.
It's a lot of your time, man. Yeah.
So and that's how I got involved. And eventually, you just start to know people. You have conversations, and people will ask you back. Even as unfortunately, like, Muse isn't really around now. Yeah. That's how I got into with the Nova stuff.
But that's the thing is, the next guy basically to go and be like, hey, so Muse is like, I'm here to help if you need me to help, and somebody picks you up and you end up going to the next.
Yeah, where people just like reach out. Like that's what happened with Mike is Fallout Factions is like, hey, they're going to be here, but we don't have anybody to run events. Well, Chris, like you posted up that you painted a Fallout. That, like, you want to run this stuff? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I can definitely like come on down and help out.
And you guys will have seen that too. All of that terrain that was in the 3 Fallout games that Chris and I played was the 3D print stuff you made for Nova. So you 3D printed like nonstop.
Yeah,
and
3D
made,
printed
like, a ton of terrain. So many Cordova or Corvegas.
Yeah, I 3D printed and
So many
painted
buses.
8 tables of terrain in 2 months.
Madness.
But yeah, and then, same thing. And my wife got involved too, which is fun because it's certain things we can do together where she's not necessarily hopping into the game running side of things,
Sure.
but she does a lot with like registration for Nova. And she does a lot with like the really big charity raffle at Captain Con, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great charity. I think Dave Taylor's been part of that too, isn't he? Does he do the Army thing, or is he the Nova one?
He's at the Nova
He's
one.
At the Nova one. There's a couple of these.
I was gonna say Chris Miller, who's actually another Canadian
right,
up
there
here,
you go.
is the one who runs the charity raffle at Nova, and I guess we're also kind of indebted to him because that's how I proposed to my wife was through the charity raffle at Captain Con.
That's so nice.
But yeah, that's why she goes and she volunteers with that, and it takes on a life of its own. It becomes the thing that you do, and it throws me off now to be at a con and not have responsibilities. Like if I go to a con, like what can I do? Where can I help? Because
you don't know what to do with yourself.
It's weird to wake up in the morning and not have a schedule and not have responsibilities.
Cool. Well, let's get into the meat of it. Because the reason I wanted to talk is I wanted to ask you about the changing landscape of conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've been around for kind of the rise and fall of some of them, like TempleCon, and you've also been around for the changing of some of them. Like you and I are going to experience you've experienced the change of Nova from its old location to its new location. Adepticon is about to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some thoughts about all this stuff where you get these conventions that kind of outgrow their original space and their original format and change into new things. And this is a story kind of as old as time. Gen Con famously is so different from the way it was after it moved to Indianapolis from where it was in like Geneva originally, right? And what's funny is Gary Con, which is in Lake Geneva, is kind of more like what the original Gen Con used to be like. And Gen Con's called Gen Con was the Lake Geneva, I think, a military historical gaming convention or whatever it was called originally. But it was where D&D kind of started as a convention. And that transformation over 40 years has gone from being a small bunch of weirdos all getting together to play D&D and military history games and share each other's things they wrote and spiral binders and stuff like that to being where every Kickstarter on Earth gets announced, right? And there's like 100,000 people that show up. Same with these Comic-Cons, right? They really have changed over time. So obviously you get good things and bad things from that. You get usually a better space, nicer hotels, more hotels nearby, more stuff. But like what happened with Gen Con, you also get the cost to go if you're a company and attend these things goes up. And the ability for like weirdos and freaks to show up and get like a free craft table where they can hang out their like little wares or whatever, demo the game they've written in their basement starts to go away. Right? You get the demo. There's the last sort of like bastion of that was the demo area upstairs at Adepticon. I don't think you needed to actually sign up for it. You could have people just go to like the open gaming tables and show off their games, and they still do that. So Nova's already been through it. I'd love to hear about Nova this year. This is the second year they're in the new location?
Second year in the new location.
Yeah, so the second year in the location. I'd love to hear about that. And then I'd love to sit and talk with you a minute about what you think is going to happen at Adepticon this year, because it's about to change venues for 2025. And I was at the last 2024. You were at 2023.
Yeah, I missed out on 2024.
Yeah, missed out in 2024. But it's going to be in a brand new location. So I'd love to talk about that too. So first of all, give me the skinny on Nova. Where was it originally and where is it now?
So Nova used to be in the Crystal City area of Northern Virginia, which is where Nova comes from.
Northern Virginia. It's almost like the Gen Con thing, right? Like Geneva.
Yeah. So, which was a business orientated area. It was neat that it was far enough away from anything that if you were driving in, you don't hit traffic. Like you don't hit major things, but it was literally across the bridge from like all the monuments and the tourist stuff, which was cool too. And Nova, since the beginning, has always done like a really cool job of like, well, we're going to discount the hotel for the 2 weeks, the week before and the week after. So it was great for me and Zara, especially in the times with her old job before she had to go teach really early, before she had to prep. We'd go down on like a Monday or a Tuesday and be like, all right, we're going to do touristy stuff. We're going to hit the monuments. We're going to do this. Yeah. Then we're going to go to the con. Then the last day, we're going to go to the zoo. You know, it was great.
And what kind of con was it? Because conventions are notoriously different. Like we just talked about TempleCon. It was a steampunk convention that ended up having a War Machine tournament that was so popular it became a big War Machine convention. This one was primarily a 40K tournament in the beginning. Yeah?
So Nova was always really big on GW.
Yeah.
You know, like the 40K was its own floor pretty much.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it was the they basically went into the basement, right? So you come in the lobby and the 3 levels below that were the convention areas. So the layer below that was actually just 40K.
Wow.
Which was pretty neat. And that was just the main 40K. That's not including like the narrative events and some other events that they're having to other floors. They had Necromunda, Titanicus, you know, eventually became a thing. But Nova as a whole, you know, especially back in those times, it was really primarily an event-based con.
Not a lot of vendors.
Was primarily like a lot of the events were the competitive event, meaning that there wasn't a lot of casual play. Like if you weren't really like signed up for an event, you were probably not playing at that time. There wasn't
a lot of people hanging out.
Yeah,
I mean the way that some cons have, like you just come to hang out and see the vendors.
There was a little bit of painting. There was like a little bit of a vendor area. It was you know, kind of a smaller area. And it had some go-to things, but it was primarily like, all right, like we're going to go, and as soon as events would go live, you know, Zara and I would log in, be like, all right, these are the events. And then the days we don't have events, we're probably not even going to go down to the con floor. We're probably just going to go out, you know, because there's just not that much stuff really going on.
Versus like at TempleCon, you could go walk around the vendors floor and look at like bespoke corsets. You know, there's cool things to do.
And casual stuff games. Everywhere. Casual stuff everywhere, you know, and like, that's kind of like where it started, and you saw a lot of the same people like return like regularly again and again, and
it was super popular. Like when I worked in the States, it was the Nova Open as a tournament was the one of the 2 that like staff would go to. Yeah. Like the trade sale guys and the retail guys from around the area and stuff would plan their like yearly vacation to do like the team tournament or to go do like the narrative events or what, and lots of like. Alumni from Workshop too, like Dave Taylor was involved in the charity painting contest and stuff like that. So it was very like well regarded in the competitive community for Warhammer 40,000 as being like just super well run. You know what I mean? And like this really tight competitive event. But you never heard about it as like a place people would go to check out a new indie game, or like it was you went to play games and be in this like prestigious sort of like win-lose tournament typically.
And then, you know, I think it was 3 years ago, three conventions ago, you know, Mike got the job at GW. Yeah. So Mike, the original person who was, you know, running the whole big thing, you know, kind of went into that, and it seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest if you're doing
so he stepped away from Nova.
You know, and now it's kind of a new group of people running it, and they did 1 year in the old hotel, which was fun, and it seemed like there was an increase in the interest in, we want to pump up our board games a little bit. We want to pump up our casual play.
New ideas are getting introduced.
You know, like we want to open up to a few new things.
And they probably already had when you got the job, they probably already had the place booked. So that's probably why you had that transition year too. So like whoever the new team is that's running it, they're fulfilling that plan from the previous year.
And then last year, they moved into the Washington Hilton, which is in DC.
Yeah, like, it's in like historic
DC. Yeah.
Actually, so what's the difference between that space and this space? First of all, why do you think they made the move?
I think it was primarily about the space.
Yeah, just getting more.
They were running out of room. You know, the last year or 2 that they did Nova, they actually took convention space in the hotel across the street.
Yeah. Overflow. They had like an overflow place.
You know, overflow. There wasn't too many places to eat. Like they had to have food trucks coming in, and then the food trucks were overwhelmed.
Wow.
The main hotel would sell out. The overflow would sell out. You know, like it was. People would run into parking issues because the main hotel, the secondary hotel, all the parking was filled. The overflow parking lot was filled.
Sure.
Like, and it's like, all right, we're hitting max capacity here. We're growing a lot as a
con. We have no more room. This is it. The way is shut. We cannot get out.
And also, you know, not for nothing, but a lot of people complain, like on Sunday, it's a business area. Everything closes. Only after the awards they used to do on Sunday, it's like, all right, where are we going to eat? It's like, well, we can eat at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Because like, there's like 2 corporate places open. Everything else is closed.
That's it. All the other restaurants are closed down. Like, good luck getting anything else. And you don't want to take your car out because there's no parking anywhere.
Sure.
So, but they moved into the new hotel, you know, the Washington Hilton, which the gaming space, the amount of space they have available is much bigger.
Yeah.
it's also like better ventilated. It's like
It's a more modern. It's probably a more
Yeah.
modern convention center, basically, and it's also in DC, so it has to be high end because conventions in DC are by nature going to be prestigious and high end.
Right. So they have a full demo hall now. They have a lot of casual space to play games right now. They have, they're trying to open up to a lot more game systems now where it's still primarily GW. Like the 40K event hall is bananas. Like you'll see the pictures where like it's like blue overhead lighting and just the huge Space Marine at the front, and GW is actually there and vending now.
Well, that's it, because Mike's come back now with things that they're doing like Adepticon, where they're doing previews, they're doing vending, they're doing all kinds of like, they're sort of like, it's not Warhammer Fest like in the UK, but they have kind of a road show that they're touring around to these places. Nova was like a logical place because that's the East Coast big con.
So they're trying to attract more indie developers and stuff like that. Like Owen actually brought his Sunshard Emblem game with him, and they were doing demos pretty much every single day there.
That's great.
Which was pretty cool, and they were well received, and people were actually going to demos. They opened up a whole board game area, and they do play to win games, where it's like every board game you play, you actually have the chance to win the game.
Oh, so yeah, you play the game, you might win the copy of the game too.
Yeah, which is really cool. The Capital Palette this year, their painting competition this year was bananas. Absolutely bananas.
That's awesome.
Like the panel of judges they had was incredible. It's so many like big names who were doing it. Dave Taylor's still like one of the major organizers for it. But it was one of those things where you just like, I looked in every single case and I'm like, man, none of these are even like remotely on my level. Like these were clearly like year-long projects.
Yeah,
for
you're just
every
like, nope,
person who
no,
did it.
you're just furious. You're like, there's no way. I can't even live it. I'm just furious. I'm so angry right now. These people aren't human. I don't know what's happening.
And I think one of the interesting trends we were talking about with Dave is he's like, yeah, in the Youngbloods category, there were 24 busts.
No, that's great.
Which means that there's kids who are taking up the hobby of painting.
Taking it seriously.
The hobby of painting, not because he's like, the Youngbloods used to be like, well, I play Warhammer 40K and here's this one captain that I think I did a slightly better than average
I'll
job
enter
with.
this into the thing.
It's like, no, I bought a bust to try and paint this
So
thing.
it sounds like this was nothing
cool.
but positive because it came from a place that was no longer fitting. There wasn't really a lot to do in the area on Sundays. And they looked at the needs and moved it to a place where all those needs are being met all of a sudden, right? You took it from a non-interesting sort of place. It's not interesting, but it definitely didn't have the same interest level as like a tourist place like, DC with all these amenities, and they just leveled the whole space up. So let's talk about Chicago then. Because this is a whole different thing. And it's funny because I don't want to naysay, but for moving from Chicago to Milwaukee, there's nothing wrong with Milwaukee, but it's not Chicago. And the Renaissance, while here's the thing is they're moving that convention too. They're moving it to Milwaukee. They're moving it to a massive, beautiful, brand new convention center. So a lot of things that you just said about Nova are going to be true for moving Adepticon, right? You're moving it to a space that has way more places to eat, way more hotels in the area. Like you can walk from like 4 or 5 hotels to the area. They're already sold out, I'm pretty sure. Most of the hotels that are like attached to the convention center.
They were sold out pretty quickly.
Like super quickly, that's right.
Not as quick as the year before.
Yeah.
But
and like physically, they have unlimited space. That convention center is going to swallow Adepticon. Like I think they're only using half of it. Wow. And it's just massive, which means between vendors and events, like that place is going to be fantastic. The one difference is, and this is just for me, Adepticon already had a massive amount of indie gamers and vendors and like other small junior companies coming to it. And there was like a culture around those companies meeting and like hanging out together and networking and stuff that was built into the Renaissance. Like the fact that the venue is the hotel and most of the vendors and like event runners stayed at the venue because they got first stab at all the accommodations when they paid their basically their money to go show their stuff there. Unless they've organized that for those vendors, like my hope is that the runners for Adepticon have basically said, hey guys, this is the hotel all the vendors are going to stay at, and we'll give you first crack at it. Because the thing I'm worried about is that under the stairs in the lobby network meeting of people who work in the gaming industry was what made Adepticon for me, was that you had people from all over the world show up to like show their new stuff off, meet each other, and everybody got to sit in that hotel lobby and be like, oh, someone else understands this insane career that I've chosen. And like, you
Right.
got to talk to those people and hang out and network with those people. And that brought more of that to Adepticon. What made Adepticon unique in the landscape, where on the East and West Coast, you had LVO and Nova, which were primarily tournaments first, vendors second. The Renaissance Schaumburg brought together the gaming community in a way that no other convention ever has in the Midwest. And I really hope that keeps happening at Adepticon, because they already have the cool stuff to wander around and see. They already have the indie cred, and they have the demo area where many people show up and like show off their game they've written in their basement. Whereas Nova's chasing building that, LVO's chasing building that, Adepticon has that.
Yeah.
So they're going to level up all the same things you just said that Nova leveled up, moving to that new space. Man, I'm so worried that they might lose some of they might pull a Gen Con where they do the opposite, where they lose the cool indie neat stuff that kind of made them such a melting pot and I like exchange of ideas pace, like for the last 10, 20 years.
So I hope not. You know, like I think it's tough with
It happened naturally because it was in one hotel. Like you couldn't plan it. It's not something Adepticon created on purpose. It just happened. Like unless someone tells these indie people where this other hotel is now, like this is the hotel you need to stay in. This is where all the vendors are going. This is where all the companies are going. Yeah, that's going to be super important, I think, for this maintaining into the future.
I mean, I think the tough part is that they were definitely at the max capacity for that hotel.
100%.
Like that's
it had to happen.
Yeah, that was definitely part of the reason I didn't make it the last year was that you know, the day that the hotel went live, I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna actually be traveling with work. Like,
sure,
you're traveling with kids. I can't go on my phone. Zara, it's like super duper important at exactly this time. Log in and get the hotel room. She was 2 minutes late and like couldn't get into it. And then it becomes for Chicago, we're gonna fly. And I don't want to fly, stay in an overflow that you need to take an Uber every single day.
Yeah.
The Ubers are already overtaxed.
Not only that, like you can't even park.
Yeah. Like
there's like the problem with the Renaissance became, I stayed in an offsite hotel always just because I didn't want to, like, I wanted to be able to get away. But you couldn't park when you got to the show. Like there was nowhere to park your car. The entire parking lot was completely slammed. People are parking on the road illegally to like get in and stuff like that. It was a nightmare. Like it had to change. It had to move no matter what. You're completely right. But the other half of that too then is it's not Chicago. There are traditions around like what Chicago restaurant you would go to afterwards. Like it also already had the ingredient of being in a cool place with cool stuff to go see and do. Yeah. And it's got like almost 20 years of tradition of like, this is the noodle spot I go to. This is the bar we all go to afterwards. This is the restaurant we all go to afterwards. And that'll come back in Milwaukee, right? People will build that over time, but it's not Chicago. It's not the same as being in Chicago.
No, exactly. Because I knew going out to Adepticon, I went out, I think at least 4 or 5 years. It was like, all right, well, this is the day we're going to do Portillo's.
Yep.
You know,
this is the day we're going to do Jim's Beef. This is the place we're going to go to.
Giordano's. You know, the breakfast thing was real big. The wild berries or whatever with the pancakes the size of your face.
The fact that you remember those names is one of those things that people, I think that's an unspoken thing about these cons. Like if you run them for 20 years, not just the convention becomes important, the city it's in becomes super important. And like the tradition that happens around that, because we all went to this tattoo parlor drunk and got tattoos out. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff happens in that city because of that. So I'm really hoping this new venue has the ability to, again, foster that, because that's, again, a thing that Adepticon wasn't lacking, that these other cons kind of are lacking.
And that's where it's big. I mean, even Simon Expo, that crazy diner, dance club, karaoke bar, like
Hotlands,
everything.
Baby. Hotlands has got so much stuff.
To this day, best chicken and waffles I've ever had in my entire life. Like,
yep. Core memories of conventions. So, man, just to round this up then, I guess, if you had one word of advice for like the first time you ever went to a con about like volunteering at a con or like doing this, like where you decide there's a company you really want to support, you want to go do something for people. Because as these conventions grow, they get more employees and less volunteers, but you can still volunteer for most of these cons. What would you tell yourself? What's the thing that you would say about what's rewarding about this, and what's some of the challenges that you'd want to look out for and avoid?
Oh man, that's such a tough. Like, there's so many things. I'd say top three, right?
Sure, yeah.
Is top three, and part of this is coming from like the music industry and stuff like that, and
Sure.
being in bands and like whatever. Is like, don't let people abuse your labor for free.
Yeah.
Like, because the bottom line is, even when you're volunteering, there should be some give back. People should be appreciating like kind of the stuff that goes in, and really where a lot of these cons are allowed to operate is through volunteers putting in.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like demand the world like, oh, like if you don't give me free dinner and this and that, like I'm not gonna do it. But don't be like, oh, I'm gonna go to this thing and it's costing me $1,000 to come here and just work for free.
To pace yourself. Yeah.
And any solid company, any company that you want to do volunteer work and you want to represent, should be also one that's like has your well-being at heart.
Yeah.
Another thing with cons is I would be like, to your first con, go and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Go and enjoy it, and like enjoy it in a way that is not, I'm going to go and play all the events all the time, because
Pace yourself 100%.
'cause
You
it
will break
hurts.
yourself. It will hurt,
Yep.
especially as you get older. It will physically pain you.
Even the first con, I was like 23 or 24,
Yeah.
and and man, just the staying up all the time, like you don't enjoy it as much. Like if you are not getting at least like 4 hours of sleep a night,
You also rob yourself of the opportunity of being surprised by something and delighted by and discovering something. If you fill up every hour of every day with like playing games or doing something, you lose the opportunity to discover something that you didn't know was there. Right? Have some unstructured time, especially like something like Adepticon, where you can find a new game, or you can do a demo, or you can, meet some punks in the corner that have like, sculpted their own minis and made some new game that you can check out.
or even just exploring the area, like especially if you're going to a place that you're not normally from, like go
Chicago,
out
yeah.
and try something new. Like it's the little things. I mean, it's just like coming out here and hanging with you. Pickle fries.
Yeah, you didn't know you would try pickle fries.
I didn't know pickle fries
I
existed.
was in pickle fries.
We
got a spot next to the ball hockey place out here, because of course we have a ball hockey place in the summertime that sells pickle fries, and they are amazing.
And I think that kind of just goes to the third one. Even if you're volunteering, always leave time for fun.
Yeah.
Always leave time to hang out with people, take care of yourself, because there was definitely 2 cons in a row. I did that TempleCon in the summer and went to Nova 4 days later. And
You're
those
insane.
cons, I worked for 2 vendors at TempleCon, and I worked for 2 vendors and volunteered for CMON at Nova.
Wild.
And at the end of that show, like I was upset. Like like my wife actually made it down in the end, and like I was like, man, like I went and I'm in pain. Like
I'm physically hurting,
because I would get up at 6 a.m, go down and like work for Dan or work for Muse, and then get out at 6 o'clock and just throw on a CMON shirt and run across.
From Tectonic.
Yes, Dan from Tectonic Craft Studios. And then run across the CMON booth and run Wrath of Kings and Dark Age demos and get out at midnight and eat lunch.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah.
and that's not the experience, like you really got to make sure to go out. Even at Nova, where, I vended for 2 days for A-Case and ran all the Fallout events on Saturday
this year,
from this one. Thursday night, I played in a 2-round event for Adeptus Titanicus.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which was a lot of fun.
Just building some time for fun. Yeah.
Friday, I went to my first painting class ever. I'd never
on weathering. That's right. You told me about that.
Yeah, with Dan Osborne. And it was such a cool experience, and...
Yeah, try something new. That's great advice. Do something you've never done before.
Even if you're working, even if you're volunteering, even if you're running the convention, take the time to
Take
enjoy it,
advantage of
because otherwise, you're just working more. You're taking time off from your regular job to come out and work, and you're not taking the time to kind of savor what's away from that,
Well, my one bit of advice, just to kind of mirror like the sum of what you said, is I think that the best part about conventions is it shows us in real time that a rising tide kind of lifts all ships, and that there isn't a best miniature game. There's the best way to spend your time. And actually, all of these companies and all of these games are just an excuse people use to spend time together. Those conventions prove it. You can get 5,000 people to come out and build core memories and traditions around a weekend hangout playing a variety of different games. Doesn't matter what game you're there for. Everybody's experience is equally valid, and just have a good time. Yeah, and talk to as many people as you can about why they're excited, because whatever thing they're excited about, what they're really excited about is getting to do it and show you how cool what they made is, and just have a good time.
And convention families are a thing. Like,
Yeah, it's true.
It's
Yeah, your
wild.
family,
Like,
yeah.
you know, it's yeah, exactly. It's like I have the people where it's like I'm only gonna see you 2 or 3 times a year, but we're gonna have a great time when we see each other.
Yeah.
And it's wild. My wedding took place during like still COVID times,
Yeah.
right? And we're getting like people from Pennsylvania,
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
people coming down from like Vermont and Rhode Island, and all these other people just like filtering out because it's like, yeah, this is the family we built for 10 years,
Over-
you know,
yeah, over
and
all these conventions, yeah.
and it's real close. Like despite the fact you only see people every so often, it's such a wonderful.
We're going through the war together. You know what I mean? Like when you're setting up and tearing down, it's true though. You get your little battle brothers setting up and tearing down. Like when you have to get it set up, torn down in like 24 hours on either end, and then you are just in a sea of people for like 5 days. The more times you go through that, like, yeah, it becomes familiar and comfortable, but you are like shattering yourself for a week basically to get this thing done. You build some core sort of like bonding moments with people as you do that stuff. Well, cool, man. So where can people find you? Do you still have a podcast? What are you promoting? Do some pluggies. Do some pluggies.
Man, so some pluggies. So the podcast is kind of every so often, which a lot of people joke about because it's the Dead Wargames Society. And they're like, oh, of course you had to kill off your own podcast in order to do that.
That's a Dead Podcast Society.
The Dead Podcast Society. Every so often we do randomly drop an episode. Yeah. We did recently do one with Privateer, switching over to Steamforged and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
I'm real excited about Owen's new game. Owen is my podcast partner, buddy. And he's coming out with Sunshard Emblem. They did demos at Captain Con and Nova. And they should be going to Kickstarter pretty soon, actually.
Amazing. Well, we'll link all that stuff in the video descriptions. People can check it out.
Which should be a lot of fun. And then in the end, the conventions themselves. I almost feel like that Guy Fieri stuff where it's like, I don't want to talk about it too much because then it's going to get too popular. Yeah. I'm not going to be able to go anymore. There's too many people.
Is there any cons you want to promote that are smaller cons? Yeah.
Captain Con. Captain Con is an amazing convention that's in Rhode Island every February. It's kind of what grew out of TempleCon, but the gaming side of things. Smaller convention, honestly, I think it's like 800 people or so.
That's awesome.
But it's a one-cost ticket. Like you pay one cost to get in, and you can do whatever you want. Like whether it's events or demos or whatever.
See, I want to start going to smaller cons again, man, because they're so much fun. My favorite con right now in Canada is HalCon, and it's big for Halifax, but it's such a chill, low-key fun. Like I would rather go to that con than almost any other giant convention. Because again, it's an everything fandom con, but it has gaming, it has painting, it has miniatures, RPGs, it has like TV and movie stuff. Like I love mid-sized cons. So I need to come out to more of them. Maybe I'll drive to Rhode Island this year.
That'd be awesome. Right? Or come to Nova. Nova's fun too.
I almost came to Nova this year. Maybe.
But yeah, in the end, the last place where people can find me is still I do still commission paint when people really want stuff. I don't promote it as much as I used to.
Yep.
But yeah, if you need like a ton of terrain for Fallout, apparently I can make that happen.
Awesome.
So Weary Wargamer Painting.
Weary Wargamer Painting. Sweet. Well, thanks so much for doing this, man, and thanks guys for watching. We'll see you for in the future. Of course, you can find me at my Patreon, Guerrilla Miniature Games at Guerrilla Miniature Games patreon.com/Guerrilla Miniature Games. Also my email address. Or you can email me at guerrillaminiaturegames@gmail.com to set up games and come in and see the studio. And yeah, you get this podcast 3 days early on Patreon, unless we're talking about something that's under like a thing and I have to set it at a certain time, as well as access to backstage recordings, which Chris and I just did a couple for Steel Rift, which they got to watch.
That was a blast.
And various early access to things I write, and of course the AMAs and sit and talky stuff too. So thanks for watching. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, bye everybody.